So, that same spirit that leads us to hear the voices of our kupuna, to write beautiful mele, and that love for our land that puts it into song, is that same part of aloha āina that drives us to achieve a better future for our islands in the midst of all the challenges and crises that we face. So I'm going to kind of transition us to our first panel of the day. In April 2018, a historic storm brought almost 50 inches of rain to Kauaʻi's North Shore in about a 24-hour period. The catastrophic rainfall event would later be dubbed by some a rain bomb that caused devastating flooding and triggered landslides that left communities from Hanalei to Hāʻena inaccessible except by boat for weeks. Our first panel of today will highlight innovative homegrown solutions that emerge out of crisis left by the rain bomb. It brings together three respected community leaders of Hāʻena who will share personal stories about the storm's immediate aftermath and longer-term impacts, the application of traditional Hawaiian knowledge, practices in response and recovery efforts, and the crucial leadership and organization roles that community organizations played in disaster relief and long-term building. So please welcome our panelists. I think I'll introduce all of them and then maybe you guys can come up as a collective. Uncle Chipper Wichman has worked to preserve the precious natural and cultural resources of Hawaii for his entire adult life. He is the former president of the National Tropical Botanical Garden, where he worked for 47 years. He created the Limahuli Garden and Preserve. He founded the Hui Makainana o Makana and played a large part in bringing the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN World Conservation Congress, to Hawaii in 2016. Since his retirement, Uncle Chipper has been focused on helping the Hui and Hanalei initiative to transform Hāʻena into a leading example of regenerative tourism. Mahalo nui, Uncle Chipper. I want to introduce Lei Wann. Lei serves as a director of Limahuli Garden and Preserve on Kauaʻi. Her deep roots in the community trace back over 500 years as her ancestors, Makainana, stewards have tended to Limahuli Valley for generations. In her role, Lei carries forward this legacy for stewardship, blending traditional practices with modern innovations to maintain the health of the entire Ahupua'a system. Under her leadership, Limahuli Garden and the greater Hāʻena community work collaboratively to preserve their cultural heritage, foster sustainability, and ensure a thriving future for the land and its people. And from Kauaʻi's North Shore, Billy Kinney was raised by older generations of fishers and farmers, paniolo and matriarchs. Billy received his MA in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Hawaii Manoa, and his thesis contextualized Hawaiian planning through ontological mapping and pule via Papaku Makavalu. Currently, Billy is the Assistant Director of the Hui Makainana o Makana, based in Hāʻena. Following the historic flooding of Haleleʻa Moku in 2018, the Hui manages Hāʻena State Park as a model of community-led resource management. So how about a hand for our panelists, Uncle Chipper, Lei, and Billy. It's a real honor and privilege to have you folks here. And this is just really a chance to learn from you folks and collective sharing to inform our students and community and people in leadership positions, what we can do better. So maybe if we can start by, and whoever would like to take this particular question, if you can start by taking us back to the days and before and right after the rain bomb. What were some of the immediate impacts that you witnessed in your communities, and was there anything particular that stood out?
Aloha mai kākou. Yeah. We don't try to go back too far. our community, probably many of you have been there and were aware prior to the rain bomb, was completely overrun by tourism. And in spite of our best efforts for decades to try and limit and control the visitor numbers, it just got greater every year. And part of our challenge prior to COVID, prior to the rain bomb, our state government considered a mandate to grow our visitor numbers every single year. There was no discussion about circular economies, regenerative tourism, sustainable visitor numbers. It was growth, growth, growth. We were on the addiction of the visitor money train. And Hāʻena was at the point of that spear, completely overwhelmed, to the point where our people couldn't walk on the street. Our keiki couldn't go on the street with their bikes or on their, your dogs was likely to get run over, would be run over. We couldn't go into Hāʻena State Park, which is, for many of us, this is one of the most sacred vahipana, vahikapu in the āina. And it was just a tourist playground. And so many of us knew our kupuna would answer our call. And the evening before the rain started, my wife Hauʻoli and I were driving back from Honolulu. And as we came around a turn up on the top of Lumaha'i, there was a puʻeo sitting on the road. Many of us have seen puʻeo, but usually they fly away when they see your headlights. They're smart, This one never moved, and he's right on the center line. And so we actually went past and stopped our car and backed up. And he was talking to us. He was the hoailona that our kupuna were about to answer our prayers. The next morning, the rain started with an intensity I've never seen in my life. And when it ended, we knew that we would never go back to what we had been experiencing. Because for us, we had been planning this reduction and trying to manage visitor numbers, but to try and reduce from 6,000 people a day to 600, it just was inconceivable. How could we ever do that? The industry would push back, people would cry, you're taking this away from us. But our kupuna intervened, and so we went to zero. And we went to zero for long enough that when we came back, it was a completely different conversation. And I don't want to over-dominate, but these disasters, and Billy brought this up the other day, he was talking about, so I don't want to take this too much away from him because he should also mention that is our community has been through a lot. 46, 57, 2 devastating tsunami. 82, 92. I get home video standing in the eye of Iniki, 200-mile-an-hour winds. We were without power from September to after Thanksgiving. It was all about water. Never mind electricity and food, it was about water. Because when your aquifer, when all your potable water is being pumped out of the aquifer and your grid is destroyed, but it brought our community together in a way that nothing else could. All of those disasters simply reinforced our value of ohana, of malama. Everything that was important the day before was no longer important afterward. And in that, it created a space for us to envision the future. And that was the space we stepped into as community leaders. This was the window our kupuna had given us to change, to huli, to never look back, and to move forward. Well, we're going to look back because that's what we don't like to see again, but to move forward. So I'll got plenty more to say, but I'll give these guys a chance. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would say, just building off what Uncle Chipper is saying, is that immediately after the mobilization of not people but values Ohana values is the most imperative thing, the most important thing, right, is mobilization of these things that we've been preparing ourselves for over all of our generations. We've experienced all these crises before. I got a big gash, I got a big scar on my knee because I was 1 month old when Eva hit, and our big living room glass broke on me. And when I was in the crib, and I have a scar from it, so I can say I lived through Eva. but in Iniki, I was 10 years old, and I seen how community came together. You know, my grandpa and all of the families in our community, they open up all their freezers and they cook for everybody. Everybody take turns making meals for each other. So we know what it takes, right? And how that manifested in 2018 is organizations and hui started to pop up, like the Hanalei Initiative and the Waioli Kalo farmers. You know, it was the mobilization and the need for organized efforts to fix what was needing to be fixed. And the fix wasn't because of fire and rain, right? The real crisis was the plight of our land and the plight of our people. Wasn't because of fire and rain. The fire and rain just illuminated everything.
Yeah, I'll just further add to that. I think in all of these events, that's the first thing you lean on is your core values of what really matters. And I don't want to take away too of how powerful some of these events were and traumatizing too. We were so fortunate in this flood that we did not lose anyone that we're aware of. And though there were so many stories of so many close calls. I'm looking at my cousin Kapua over there, and one of their friends who lives in one of their homes down in Kalihiwai. I mean, just seconds. If they had waited just seconds longer, washed away a whole family, you know. And you just, moments like that, when you hear stories like that and you look at things differently, you're just thankful and thankful for each other. Myself included, Billy and I are the same age, and I was 1 year old during Eva. My oldest memory is our roof collapsing and running to, or I was being held, my sister was next to my dad, and running to the house next door and pounding on the door, my dad pounding, trying to get into the neighbor's house, you know? And those are the kinds of things we grew up with. And I think it shaped who we are today, and in the resilience of this flood too, that we know we can get through things, and our values are strong and what really matters.
Just to add to that, I think this is really important as we look at Lahaina and Hāʻena, Wainiha, Hanalei in our future as we respond from these disasters. So I'm going to go back. So in the 1980s, we were fighting what we called the boating wars, in that the state basically said, whoever likes a commercial boating permit, sign up. And they issued 80 commercial boating permits out of Hanalei Bay, which is not a harbor. And it was destroying our reefs. But many of our families were employed in that industry. So it was a hard-fought battle that we eventually won, but it split families. And the day Iniki's winds came and blew everything away, it blew away all the pilikia and all the eha and all the division in our community, because it created this opportunity for us to refocus on relationships and taking care of each other. And I think that's a very, very important thing, because when we talk about rebuilding Lahaina, and we talk about rebuilding our communities on Kauai, the money can divide us. So these disasters create opportunity to reset that economic imbalance and create a future that's more circular, more regenerative, more malama kind action for us guys, where we can control that destiny.
Mahalo, mahalo. And so I hear, it's probably counterintuitive to the modern mainstream where, crisis can bring out the worst things. What I'm hearing from you folks is the Ivas, the Iniki. I was on Kauaʻi during Iniki. I remember that. I think it was a good fun time because I never had to go to school. Felt like 8 months I wasn't in school. We was just playing with our friends, no more electricity, wake up with sunrise, you go sleep when the sun set.
Mari lunches. Did you have the Mari lunch?
Mari lunch, yeah. Finally, the National Guard came through. They was cooking hamburgers. Word got out, get down to the neighborhood center in Kalaheo, you can get free hamburgers. And they was handing out MREs, and that's right. And just like Billy said, it was from one freezer to the next. So you had kole and lobster, and it was like, this is great. What are we doing? Let's keep this up. So it's counterintuitive, right? And it sounds like it's the bonds of community that experiencing those multiple crises better prepared you folks for what the rain bomb was. And it sounds like Uncle Chipper saying it's not a rain bomb. It was an intervention of Kane, right, that actually bettered the community. It was a flushing, a cleansing, so however we see it. Are there critical things that you can remember around that time that the community decided to take action that you think were really fundamental and kind of instrumental to getting you towards this better future? I mean, imagining no one thought of that kind of effort, before.
For sure. For sure, nobody was envisioning 50 inches of rain. It wasn't 20, I counted it was 16 hours. It's unbelievable. No, we couldn't envision that, but I'll tell you what, which was, we were prepared for that opportunity because we'd been planning for almost 30 years. When we founded the Hui Makainano Makana in the late 90s, we created about 100-page, we call it our Green Bible, kind of organizational vision, strategic plan, all the stuff we achieve with this new nonprofit. It had in that the concepts of the community, the Hui managing the park. It had in there the concepts of getting the visitors out of their cars and into shuttles. It had in there the concept of reducing the total visitor numbers so that our locals, our community could come back. That was, I don't know, that was 20 years before we ever had this opportunity. During that time, we also were building relationships with the government. And I can't tell you how many communities now, they come to Hāʻena, we like learn what you did, we like do them in our place. And that's great because we want to see that replicated everywhere. But what I tell them is, we worked for 20 years for free, there was no money. Out of our pocket, we buy the gas. We cleaned the nahelehele off all of our lo'i that were feeding our community because the state condemned it, kicked our people out, let the invasive trees grow over it. So we did it inch by inch, day by day, labor by labor. This bug will come help us. He was, right? Yeah? Yeah. We were all more fit back then. I mean, at one point, we never even have any equipment. We was winching trees out of the ground, but the best was the Onipana Hui Kalu group that came in 1999. 100-something people, we had pulled one Java plum tree out by the roots. The Rapun brothers had shown us how, I mean, those was magic moments. But what my point was, we were prepared, so when this opportunity came, we could step into that window, right? Because if not, that opportunity comes and you're not ready to mobilize and move, you don't know what your vision is, you're going to miss that opportunity. And so I think that is something super important is you should now, even though it seems so audacious, we're never going to get there, create your vision for what your community should be. Create it now so that, and make that thing power within your community, because the messiest, most difficult work is community. We thought we had this beautiful vision. We had community advisory group and all this stuff. And then we had a big meeting, Honolulu School. And then all these people was against it. We had them petition given to the mayor from the lineal families. We don't like this plan. Bring them in, start over again, fix that. So when that rain bomb hit, everybody was on board. Everybody was on board. And that, I can't emphasize that enough, is be prepared. We couldn't envision the rain bomb, but we were prepared for something like that to give us that window to change. If that rain bomb never came along, we'd still be struggling because of all the issues. And I should also say we had built relationships within the government, within state parks. So when that rain bomb came, they reallocated money that was destined for Sand Island and took it to Hāʻena to build the infrastructure for the master plan. So when the road would reopen a year and a half later, we could actually implement that plan. So that was not something we did. That was a decision made by government. Again, because they had the plan, they were ready to move, and they saw this as an opportunity to recalibrate and redirect.
I guess if I was going to just add a few things to, I think one of the essential things our community did over the last 30 years was, again, I'm going to point out my cousin over there, Kapuas wrote, two nonprofits were essential and critical to our development as a community. One was Waipaw Foundation and the leadership of Waipaw Foundation and the Hanalei farmers, and that renaissance and drive and that opposition to stress in our community, economic stress. It was resistance against that. And from that, Waipaw Foundation started. And then following that was the Hui Makainano Makana, and having two organizations well established to answer the call when economic crisis happens, and had years of experience. And of course, things like Limohuli Gardens followed along in the footsteps of that. But those are key components to understanding how our community really functions.
I lied, I'm gonna jump in. And right after the floods, I think one of our key partners emerged, which was the Hanalei Initiative and Joe Guy. And much recognition to Joe Guy for mobilizing him and his team. They brought the expertise, the technocratic know-how to really kind of think about transportation solutions, which was really key to management of the Hāʻena State Park. And I would also, and I'll leave it at that.
Just one more piece, because you mentioned Waipaw. So another piece was when we founded the Hui in the late 90s, it was a bunch of old guys and my wife. And it's so funny, we saw Uncle Neil this morning, he goes, hey, where's the OGs, you know? But actually it was with the young guys. But we knew at that moment, we were just the placeholders for the next generation, because of the 6 of us that founded it, let me see, because Carlos was part of that, so what can I say? But most of them never even finished high school, right? Because that's how our rural, remote communities were in growing up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, because you had to go off to Kapa'a High School. That was a long ways away. So by the time you're 16, you're going work already, right? We knew we had to create this space so that our next generation, they can come back with a palapala, they can come back with the ike for be able to take this to beyond where we could even envision. And I'm so proud to be on the stage today with our 2 next gens that are coming up and now in these leadership positions. And that was another piece, right? You gotta be preparing that pipeline, because then they could step into that window and take it. Joel Guy, another one, born and raised in Hāʻena, stepped up, founded a nonprofit in September, right after the flood in April. And without their partnership, we wouldn't be having the same effect that we have today, because we're not hui makainano o na makana by accident, because we're the fishermen, we're the farmers, we're the, you know, and then all of a sudden the opportunity came, you're gonna run an e-commerce site, and you know, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not us. But Joel stepped into that void. He said, we partner with you. We'll do the e-commerce. We'll do all that kind of stuff to get all the brainy guys. Oh, solid. Together we can do it. Waipa, the initiative, the hui, limuhuli, it's our hui together that makes that la hui for us. Sorry.
I want to dig into that more. So just like, I'm hearing from the panelists, my own personal experience, and probably many of us have had it. Who's been back to Hāʻena since 2018? Should I raise their hand? My experience was, I went back and I thought, holy smokes, this place is better than it was, right? I mean, not too many places in Hawaii that we've seen. We're used to more and more. Continued growth, more waste, more cars, more litter, more opala, less, space with our ohana. And this was something uniquely different, right? So can you guys talk through, and tour buses coming in, I see Hawaiian drivers telling actual mo'olelo about place that are real. Parking for locals. I see my son was chasing all the pua that was gathering in the shoreline. He was blowing his mind, So maybe talking through that, like how that system functions today for those that haven't been and seen Hāʻena.
Sorry, because I'm the old guy, yeah, so they let me talk first, but it is a remarkable thing. So the rain bomb hit on April 14th, April 15th. Within 2 weeks, the state had put on the land board agenda the approval of the Hāʻena State Park Master Plan, which we had literally been working on for 2 decades. The DLNR adopted that plan, the governor signed it, and it became the law which gave us the legal ability to manage tourism and reduce visitor numbers. Because prior to that, the state had this, what did they call it, like public access is for everybody kind of thing, right? It's the U.S. perspective, not like the ahupua'a, you come into my place, you respect my place. For them, it's open, free game, anybody come. So that was a key piece of the puzzle. It created the legal mechanism. We'd also been meeting with, and Representative Nadine Nakamura was really key to this. For a year prior to the flood, we had been convening a group, including DOT, and so concurrent with that closure, we implemented a special no parking zone fine that meant if you parked illegally along our road, and we created the no parking zones. I mean, literally, I made the map for DOT. How often does a community get to do that? And they added a $200 surcharge. So if you park illegally, $200 on top of your regular $35, because the tourist, the $35, hey, that's just the cost of going to the beach. I don't care, right? $235, all of a sudden you got their attention. And $100 of that stays with the community police department that's enforcing that, because other than that, it all went into the general fund. So we changed laws during that period of time. And so the mechanism, the key mechanism though, was our relationship with the state. So the state gave us the hui. We're working on a 30-year nonprofit lease, which will truly create it'll be the first true co-management agreement with a state park. And that should be done by first quarter of next year. But in the meantime, they gave us a revocable permit to manage the entry and parking to the park. But we designed in our plan by intention a parking lot that was too small to accommodate everybody, because parking lots are the problem. Parking lots encourage you to rent a car and drive all over the place and congest our roads. We're trying to work on more of a multimodal transportation system, getting people out of their cars and into shuttles, onto bikes, etc. So the key to all of this was the initiative standing up a shuttle system and having that parking lot in Honolulu at Waipa. So Waipa benefits, they get revenue from the parking. The shuttle creates a mechanism to bring people in appropriate numbers. We reduced it down to 600 visitors a day from 6,000. It was a remarkable shift. And the hui manages the park, even under a revocable permit, in terms of our Malama āina activities. So we restored the lo'i. We're generating food that is distributed weekly to our community. Billy and Lei can talk more about that. And in the immediate aftermath of the floods, these communities were distributing, what do they call it, like CSA, the boxes of food, yeah, to everybody. I mean, it was just, but that mechanism is out there. So the revenue being generated is shared and kept in our community, right? That's why it's regenerative. That money is going into taking care of the park, to hiring people. I think collectively we created something like 27 new full-time positions for our community. And that was when we founded the garden 40 years ago. Our vision was, we want to create culturally appropriate economic opportunities for our people so they can stay in Hāʻena and Wainiha. They don't need to drive to Princeville and go work in the bus, you know, as a bus boy or work doing it. They can stay home in Malama āina and get paid to do it, right? Now we're all still working. We all run for nonprofits, work for nonprofits, so we're still struggling to try and get it up to a living wage. But we're getting there, and we're creating opportunities for our people to stay home. And so it's really this partnership between Waipa, Limuhuli, the initiative, and the hui. And the kingpin of all that is the hui. Who would have thought? We just the farmers and fishermen. But we the ones with all of those permits. And so, well, we get common sense, but more than common sense, we get the vision of our kupuna, right? And so you look at our strategic plan, you look at all that, it's all driven by traditional values and knowledge. And that's all we're doing. We just trying to rewind and be able to malama like our kupuna had before. So anyway, but Bill's is Bill's is involved on a weekly basis in all of these ongoing things. With Lei, we've created these cross ahupa educational programs. I mean, I think I like these guys to really, because they're taking this to a level that's beyond what we even envisioned at the beginning.
I don't want to time travel too much, but talking about UH is so funny, because in 2018 I was in either my first or my second semester at DERP, Urban Regional Planning over here, and I wasn't doing too good in my classes, to tell the truth, but my community was writing a master plan that would go on to win national planning awards. Meanwhile, I'm in planning school. So what that tells me is our communities have the rigor of what it takes to do this work. And that is based on traditional knowledge, experience, lived experience. And so I hope that is a contribution to this discussion in general, that idea that our communities have that rigor, you know. And another note about creating jobs, community-based economic development. And Lei had a big part of this, Uncle Chipper had a big part of this, the Hanalei Initiative, and Joel, and Mehana Vaughn is, and take this in all the metaphor and whatever, but we had brothers and sisters literally digging our community out of Hāʻena, and brothers and sisters digging in to get each other out, right? You had upwards of like 12 landslides on that stretch of road from Hanalei to Hāʻena, and you had people digging out and people digging in to get to one another, to connect. And with all the beautiful kauna in that, they still had to get paid. So labor and creating jobs became a really important thing that became illuminated through this disaster, this crisis, and it still continues today, because I think both of our Lei and I, in our roles as directors, it's a really important thing to make sure our people have livelihood. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add to kind of your original question too. We're so fortunate to live in a community where we have also people who are āina and just know how to respond and react immediately. Before KEMA or FEMA, any of those organizations even touch the ground, all our cousins, everybody went already make food, check on everybody, rescue them, pull out their jet ski in the middle of the flood, whatever, and respond. And how lucky we are to live in a community like that, and one that at the heart of it goes back to values and checks on everybody and make sure everybody is okay. And from that, we get to build a really strong community. And and just a few things to add to Uncle Chipper. We have now reduced cars by about, I think it's 87% is what Joel last told me in our community. And if you can imagine this white line across the road, we have one road that goes that way and comes back this way, and it's narrow and skinny. And, they get on at Waipa and Hanalei, and they ride the shuttle. 87% of our visitors ride the shuttle now, reducing fossil fuels immensely. And again, you'll hear like our local voices in the van, heeding warnings, telling stories, giving them history of the place so they know how to be a conscious tourism. That's a common word nowadays people use in the tourist industry. But we have to set that precedence for them. So by the time you get off the shuttle, you have no excuse but to do things right. You've heard the lecture and whatnot. And then just to make sure you got it, we got a cousin who meets you at the end of the road, and he can give it to you one more time, just in case you never hear. And he's sassy. If you know Sherman Maka, he's gonna get you. And make sure you know. But yeah, and I think a part of that is being brave enough to, we're oftentimes in opposition against tourism, but you have to be brave enough to look it in the eye and say, well, it's here. It's not going anywhere. How do I make someone better? How do I help? And I think that's a key component to all of this is our community is willing to look things in the eye and say, all right, I'm not going to ignore you anymore. I'm going to do something.
Can I just, two metrics that I want to throw out there. And so when we get an ohana in our community that's kind of got a ratoon crop of kids. And so when the older kids was growing up 20 years ago, they were not allowed to go out on the road, ride their bike, nothing, right? It was just too dangerous. Then the ratoon crop coming up now, this 5 and 6, 7, they can ride their bike, they can go on their scooter, they can go to the beach because that 87% of cars is off of our road. So that's a quality of life metric. Your kid's not gonna get run over, right? And we take it, that's a big issue for our ohana. The other one, and this kind of goes to what Lei and Billy were just saying, we're able now to control the message. So I think most of our tourists, they're kind of well-meaning, they're just ignorant. They're totally ignorant. So now when they get off the shuttle, they no more ignorance already because they've just been educated. If they miss the message on the shuttle, Sherman go get them, right? So Kauai Fire Department, who has to respond, and these are our community people, right? The firemen's guys, they're all our people. They got to risk their life in these storms when these people get stuck in Hanakapiai and they drown and all this stuff. We have not had one, in the last several years, we have not had one emergency response incident where people are being stuck in Hanakapiai and their life is at risk, so the firemen got to go in the storm to try and rescue them. We had one where a group got stuck, but it was our people that went over there and throw one backpack over the thing with some food and stuff like that. So our what did they call it, first responders is so appreciative of the fact that we're now managing these people out in this, potentially, because Napali is a natural area and can be very dangerous with the trail and the floods and the stream and everything and the surf. So we're creating a much more educated and aware visitor that is now in our āina. And it's a benefit for all of us, truly.
Mahalo nui. I think that really gets to my next question. It touches on what Billy was saying. I'm imagining that irony of you taking planning classes, you learning these so-called sets of tools, and I don't want to speak for you, but you're not struggling because you're brilliant and you know how to do it. So you're struggling for some other reason. And
What's that bar's name?
yeah, and then you're working on these plans. So I mean, in some ways, that can be a metaphor for some of what happens at the university. Is like, we're teaching skill sets and there's all these tools, but what gets counted as valuable knowledge? What gets counted as, these are the things you need to learn to mitigate crisis, oftentimes isn't Ike Hawaii. In fact, we get questioned, what you going to do with a Hawaiian Studies degree? All the time, and it's actually what won't you do with a Hawaiian Studies degree? But you guys live in a community that's not all Kanaka, and so mitigating these crises, like how do our values, our ancestral values, our knowledge systems, how does it work? Because you guys accomplish incredible things that, you're right, FEMA, others would struggle, right? We see crisis in other places, disaster and debacles. That's not what we saw in Hāʻena. So can you speak to that? How do the ancestral values work with other communities? How is it valued?
That's a big one. I just know that there's a meaningfulness in the application of some of the things you learn in academia and some of the things that you do in your place. I think I was learning about participatory processes and how to do them, but I wasn't connecting it with the participatory processes that I was already doing at Workday in Hāʻena or our Hui meetings, and it's, I was finding that that the idea of rigor in the classroom at UH wasn't allowing me to see the rigor in the lo'i and in our ohanas and in what we do. So I just needed a better way to code switch. I just needed a better way to translate. I needed a better way to change the channel, I guess. And just so happened, it was another crisis that helped me switch that was the pandemic and when I went home. And when I went home is when I could immerse myself back in the Hui and finish my master's, right? And then I was immersed in the Hui and finishing my master's. And that's when I enveloped my work, my planning school, and my knowledge with my place. I think the connection of knowledge, place, schooling, learning, is where the rigor comes from. I don't know if that answers your question, Kalamai.
I was thinking about maybe also a little bit of our identity and historical context, and if I could just share for a quick second. I think one thing for Hāʻena people that we have in common, and sometimes we don't acknowledge it, is conservation, preservation is innate in our DNA for our people. It's not a new concept. from the beginnings of times in Hāʻena. We have stories of things like puako kane. We have a puako kane that sits and watches above us. And the story says, when he rode here from Kahiki, he and his sister, and depending on who you hear the story from, there's 3 rocks, there's 2 rocks, but the story's the same. They came to protect Hāʻena. One watches the ocean, one watches the land as far as they could see. And they say as long as those 2 rocks or 3 rocks are there, the ocean will be protected and the land as far as you can see will be protected. You speed history up, you got the hui, that the original hui. We were talking about hui makainana earlier. Before that hui was the hui kuai āina o Hāʻena, which started just after the mahele. And it started in the 1800s, 1870s by our tutu. Our tutu gathered all the people in Hāʻena and said, communal lands, if we don't claim them, we're going to lose them. And he gathered William Kinney, our tutu, gathered all the families, 38 families that maybe never get along or agree, but one thing they did agree, because it was innate in our DNA, innate in who we were and our identity as people, is important to protect and conserve our resources. That's been in our story forever, since those rocks arrived. And so 38 families claimed title during that time, hold communal title. And if you imagine like today, the conservation easements we use on land, it's like the conservation easement of that day. Our tutus had no intention of developing on the property. And when his tutu comes to Hāʻena in the early 1900s and then on, she got the same message. He's been super humble up here. His tutu got the message. And when people were leaving Hāʻena, she bought the properties from them and held on to the title with no intention of development, just holding them. Speed it up to a couple more years by the 1970s and so. And what year did you get married, Uncle? 84. Wedding gift, yeah? His tutu gives him as a wedding present 1,000 acres of land as a gift. He'll never tell you that. But he got the message too. He never developed the property. He kept it in conservation. And that has been our story, and that's something that binds us as a people in Hāʻena, is conservation is innate. It's a part of our history. So when assignments come, like what to do about tourists, what to do about that, who, where we can park, the assignment is clear. It's been in our DNA all along. If it's not in the interest of conservation, good luck getting it past us, right?
Let me add just a little bit more to that, which is, there was 1984, but 1984 was also an important year in which my wife graduated from the Center for Hawaiian Studies, which was a nascent program that was just beginning. There was no buildings there. I think the Loi was there, but it had not been named Kamakaku or Kalani yet. So she graduated as one of the first graduates. I graduated with ethnobotany and horticulture background we're both proud UH graduates. And we had this dream of putting all that into place long before this ahupua'a kind of thing was a buzzword. That was our vision, was to come home to Hāʻena and put in place management programs that were based on these traditional values. And what Lei said, I think, is so important, is it's innate, it's within us, right? So when Tutu left us that land, that was not a makana, that was not a gift, that was a kuleana. And I tell you what, we paid dearly in royal property taxes on 1,000 acres in Hāʻena until we were completely clear with that vision, and then we gifted it to a nonprofit, which is Limahuli Garden and Preserve, right? And yeah, I mean, you don't need applause because you know what? You stand there and look at that āina, how can you own it? It's like unbelievable that somebody came along and said land is a commodity to be bought and sold. And maybe I can see that down here in the city where it's all concrete, but when you stand in one āina, like Hāʻena, my God, it's not a commodity. You know, this is our, and so when you have that cosmological vision, I don't know if that's the right word, but I think you guys know what I'm saying, right? You have that pilina to that place, you're gonna do the right thing. You're gonna do the right thing. And so I just feel so fortunate that my entire life, my partner, she's not here because we have a new mo'opuna wahine that trumped my my wife's priorities, I guess. But you'll meet her. She should be here in a little while. But so fortunate that we together had the ability to take these ancestral knowledge and values and be able to put them in place in terms of foundational programs to guide these nonprofits and to found the Hui Makainana. And those, when you're grounded in that way, and this is where, I forget exactly what you said, but you know, like, what is the value of a degree in Hawaiian studies? It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, it's everything, because it may not necessarily be about economics, but it's about values in life and how you look at the world. And you can do anything with that degree. I've seen it firsthand. So, I don't know. Sorry, I rambled too much, bro. Sorry.
Keep rambling. We like it. Mahalo, mahalo. Okay, so the multitude of things that our communities face, and you shared, history is unique. You guys are rooted in place. There's a lineage of trying to malama and preserve these ahupua'a and collective synergy efforts. The Hui land Hui system, you know, needs to be written about more. I have a PhD student, Mahina, that's writing her thesis on it. I advised a couple master's students in Wainiha and the other Huis. Like, it's super fascinating how our people working with the ali'i, you know, found ways to try to keep that system together. Sets of bylaws. I remember reading the Wainiha one. You cannot sell unless you sell to another member. You know, they get first priority. So you keep āina, you know, within communities. So these really innovative solutions that came out of, you know, that period, kind of after the Mahele. Our generation, you know, I remember when I got here to the university, I left Occidental. You know, this is the heyday of Dr. Hanani Trask, Likala, John, these huge debates, federal rec, independence, you know, Kalekoa Ka'eo became close with him, and so, like, you were expected to defend, hey, you with the Ku'oko'a guys, or you like Fed Rec, you know, and we scrapped on those issues. Meanwhile, community was organizing, you know, getting better efforts, and I'm just wondering, sometimes our debates on these issues make it really hard for us to, when I joined the State Water Resource Management Commission. Okay, I understand the occupation of Hawaii. I know it's belligerent. I know there's no treaty of annexation. But how do I get water back to our communities and streams, you know, in all of that struggle and crisis? How do you guys navigate those kinds of spaces, you know, and how do you work with the state guys, knowing our history and these other things, to achieve this better state and future?
Can I take a stab at that, guys? I just want to say that that was a most crucial part of our discussions in the 70s and 80s, and the success of Koho'olawe was inspirational for us, and for us, our Koho'olawe was Hāʻena, and So, without going too deep, the ahupua'a of Hāʻena was given to Abner Paki, who had never set foot on it, maybe never even saw it. It was a political bone thrown to him. And it was really Billy's great-grandfather, Billy and Lei, they share a common great-grandfather, William Kinney, who created this opportunity for the Hui Kuai āina o Hāʻena to buy that land back, right? So we bought it back because it was alienated shortly after the Mahele. It went to a man named William Pease, and our community in 1875 brought it back. But the point that I guess I'm trying to make here is I lost my train of thought. Remind me your question just briefly, because I had something important.
With issues of injustice, sovereignty, how we understand our...
So right. So then when the Hui was finally partitioned and finished in 1967, they condemned and kicked out our Hawaiian families from the breadbasket that was feeding our community, which is today Hāʻena State Park, because they wanted a gateway to the Napali coast. And so that was an eha that was festering in our community. And as these other successes like Kohoʻolawe built, that conversation was being had. To hell with the state. They took this away from us. They stole this from us. We don't talk to these guys. We don't even want to respect them. We're going to repossess the land. And in fact, the man who was the president of the Hui Makai Nana Mokana when we founded it, Jeff Chandler, he said he dropped a tree across the road and said, "That's it. We're taking over the park." That lasted about 24 hours. They got a lot more police and guns and resources than us. And back in those days, we didn't have like you saw what was happening with Mauna Kea. I mean, the Lahui was coming together. It was only us guys out there, right? I mean, so that kind of put us to this decision point. Do we go sovereignty in terms of political sovereignty, or are we going to create our own sovereignty? In that our kupuna never looked at āina as something to possess. It's not a commodity. So does it really matter who owns it? What's more important is, can we reestablish our pilina? Can we reestablish our ability to be on the āina? There's a saying, possession is 9/10 of ownership. If we're over there possessing the land, does it really matter? So we said, okay, you know what? We tried this one. We tried the tree and the police. Let's try this one. And the jury was out for about 10 or 15 years. But once our community saw that actually we're making progress, we're back on the land, we're clearing the lo'i, we're growing food again, we're getting our kids out there, they're reestablishing that pilina to this place that we had been squeezed out of. That, for us, is our own form of sovereignty. It will never replace the political and legal sovereignty that we deserve, but it's an important step for our community. It's something that's tangible that we can realize. And those relationships have been reciprocal. So as we built those relationships with the state, they began to see these guys doing something we never could. They're putting 20, 30 people on the ground over there doing all this work, pulling this stuff out. They're bringing in guys like this young man, doing all this stuff. We never could do that. And so we built this relationship of trust, and when that rain bomb hit, they were our ally and stepped into that. I think I told you this earlier, right? They got the plan approved, they reallocated their money. So they've been our biggest advocate, because for 20 years we worked with sweat equity side by side. So I think that I wanted to answer your question in that way, to understand that in a way, this land was taken away from us at the time of the Mahele and given to somebody not from there. And little by little, starting with our ancestors in the 1800s, we've been working our way back to where we are today. Is that sovereignty? We think it's a form of sovereignty.
I guess I can just add to, we've been talking a lot about land too. In this process, over the last 15 years, we also said, you know what? Well, we know we need to manage our oceans differently. Things are happening also within our ocean. And we looked it in the face, looked state in the face, looked entities in the face, and created the first community-based subsistence fishing area that got approved in Hawaii. And so we also manage and steward our ocean resources as well. And I just want to echo, you know, it's not probably the sovereignty, it's not the sovereignty all of us would like to see, but I think one of the things, Lopaka Kanako'ole, when we were in college, he told me one time, he said, I was really into sovereignty at the time in college, going Hawaiian studies and really empowered. And he said, Lei, you know what though? What good is your sovereignty if you don't know your culture? And it kind of paused me for a minute, and I was like, what are you going to fight for if you don't have your identity? And so I've always thought about that throughout the years. It's just as important when we're fighting for our sovereignty to establish our identity and who we are as a culture. And I can say that's something we, at least on our side, are doing. We have healthy fisheries. You know, nowadays, like you were saying, the pua come back to the shoreline. It's because we put quotas on catch. And I think the key thing about community-based subsistence fisheries, the main word to take away is subsistence. There's no commercial activity in our ahupua'a. Being a remote community at the end of the road in Hāʻena, we've been kind of dancing around this issue so far in our talk, but let me not water it down. We are an incredibly stressed economic community, despite hanging on through all this time, despite all these nonprofits that exist and are pillars to Hawaiian communities like Waipa Foundation. We are a Justice 40 community, so we are recognized federally as one of the most economically stressed communities, hidden and blinded by the most wealthiest people in the world. During the time of the pandemic, we had something like 15, I think it's now up to 20-something new billionaires move into our community, which suggests they don't actually reside legally in our community, but they mask it very well. And the people that do reside in our community are of the most nationally stressed people in our community. No other place on Kauaʻi is recognized as a Justice 40 community. Hāʻena community is, North Shore community is. And kind of a good thing too that came out of recent administration is identifying communities like this. And I think with all this said, it's important to identify this because subsistence, we're still doing it. We still have our sovereignty of our practice and who we are. We still know how to fish, gather, hunt, whatnot. My nails are dirty, don't look close. I come straight from the taro patch. And that's who we are. I can put dress on today for you. But tomorrow, no lag, you might not recognize me.
That's me all the time. When I get my hat and my sunglasses and my surf shorts on, nobody knows who the heck I am. So I get it. And sometimes we gotta make nice. So yeah, no, mahalo for those kind of realizations. Because I think it is so important, like as a student, as an educator, understanding these structures and how we navigate it and how we achieve a better future for our community. You know, it's really complicated, and your folks' example is really stunning. Can you think, or can you speak about the ways that maybe you're able to balance? You mentioned, different groups, different huis, and again, I think Hāʻena is super unique. Your comments about more and more billionaires moving in, and the community struggling. I think Waimea right now. I called Uncle Neil Hannes one day. I said, Uncle Neil, I've thought through a lot of things for our future in our community. I don't know how to deal with billionaires buying up our towns. I don't know what to do about that. And that's happening in Waimea. Big swaths of land being bought up by billionaires. And I know that's happening in Hāʻena. So are there any strategies for working across with different groups, whether it's state or, these kind of private interests? Anything that you can share with other communities to try to stay rooted? And I know it might be hard to even talk about, so if no can, but.
Okay. Well, I think for me, and this is just our example of things we've experienced, and I will mention too, our family, I'm very aware of the stress. Our family is one of the last Kuleana landowners in the Hāʻena district. I believe there are less than 5 of us left from Waipa Bridge on. And we know struggles really well. And just having to pay just stay afloat and live. I have to tell you, I have had to come up with the most creative solutions recently in this time. And the thing that always proves most effective in this time is working with multiple agencies, having friends, knowing and having each other's back. Look at my friend Kawika. There's so many times when his magical box of tricks has helped us through so many different things. But it's, I think always being creative, always looking for folks, looking towards leaders and folks that have been through things. I call this guy all the time. He's a wizard in getting around policies and helping through and looking at it creatively. I wouldn't say getting around, looking at it creatively. Maybe this is there went your retirement plan. I just told this whole audience how good you are. But, looking towards, sorry, Uncle, our elders that have been through it one time or another. You just mentioned Uncle Neil. I love that you just mentioned him, because just as you lean on him, I lean on him all the time. For creative solutions across the board. And I can't tell you how many times I call Kapua and Kapua, help. How would you do this sorry, I just opened another can, I'm sorry. But I think in this time and age, we have to be willing to share with each other how we got through things and how we use systems to get ahead and make little movements towards the better and greater good, if that helps.
Just emphasizing that, leaning on each other, your close friends, your cousins. We have a big support system, basically. The cousins, and they're all ninjas. We all have our skills. We all know how to circumvent the system in our own ways and work the system, but also comfort each other in the same breath. And that is really important. That is the best type of support system. Caring ninjas. That's the support system. Yeah. That's the best. And knowing the assignment, as Lei shared earlier, leaning on people who know the assignment, like Kapua, Kawika, and Uncle Chipper. Yeah.
I think you just made me think of something that's been on my mind a lot lately, and even amongst other indigenous populations right now that we get the privilege of working with is one of the things we do as cousins is we also witnessed a generation before us that didn't always get along, and the disruption and disturbance that caused to the greater good and the lahui, and we still witness it today. We do have some folks that, you know, have a different kind of mindset, or sometimes, you know, money or things like that sway the ways they look at conservation, or things like that. But one thing we say as cousins all the time is like, oh, we're not going to end up like that. No way. So at the end of the day, if we have like a dispute or disagreement, too bad you stuck with it. You know, we're not taking it there. And how important like emotional and behavioral health is within even more as we continue to be economically stressed. The importance of talking about healing and forgiveness, and we got a bigger agenda to move towards. Yeah.
Just really briefly, those were like incredible. And these guys are at the point of that spear right now because they're dealing with it in real time. I step back a little bit, but the influence of this kind of money, these billionaires, it's something we've never had to deal with, you know, in the past, and it's real. And I just want to say that it can disrupt and change things really, really fast. So I feel so fortunate when we look. I mean, during COVID, we had this one guy move into our community. He was from Australia. He couldn't get back. Australia locked down. So he bought one $20 million property just so he had a place to stay for, you know. That's the kind of, it's beyond comprehension, right, for us guys, the kind of money that we're talking about. So I just feel so fortunate when I look back at the fact that the Sproat family helped secure Waipa in the 70s and 80s. My tutu helped secure Limuhuli Valley. Our hui secured our relationship with the state park. We've been able to secure, I would say, the critical resources into being held in perpetuity in a form that makes them accessible to our community and as assets to our community. Move now. Don't wait, because that big money can come into your communities. The land trust, the legacy land, there are vehicles to do that, but it takes organizing, it takes vision, but you need to secure your land base for your lahui, because otherwise it can disappear so fast. It really can. So I don't know, you know, nobody's figured it out, because this is just, I mean, really since COVID, it's just seemed to have accelerated at a pace that was, you know, nothing we've seen before.
Yeah, mahalo for that. And I think that some of the hope in collective sharing, you know, is helping us to work together to solve kind of these problems we haven't seen before. So I'm going to have two final questions, and then I want to open it up for some broader audience, because I think we have about 20 minutes left. So if I can just kind of combine these together. The first is, what can we do to help you? You know, what can the university do? What can we do from our collective positions of leadership or kako'o? And the second one is just advice that you have for other communities, people in trying to mitigate climate crisis. You know, like you said, incredible that no lives were lost, you know, and I mean, the reality is there could be a rain bomb, you know, tomorrow in Waimea, you know, and so anything that you haven't said already to help communities kind of prepare. So what can we do to help you, and your vision kind of for the future in preparing?
Yeah, I would first off say that I feel slightly uncomfortable. I feel like it's a little tough for me to talk about Hāʻena in front of Lahaina because of that loss of life. You know, we didn't lose anybody, and I'm not here to try to find the similarities between our disaster and Lahaina's disaster, but I know there are similarities in how we're going to rise, or how we're going to come back from it. But I don't downplay the hurt. So I'll just say that. And I would also say the ways that we can help each other, the ways that anyone can help, any organization, any community, is the one thing that I fear the most about our hui, our community, is, and the one thing that I struggle about is succession. That is the one thing in the back of my mind, that is the thing that I have to tackle for the rest of my life, is how do I fill shoes? Like, for right now, I imagine like a line of slippers just like going down this stairs right here, and they're all empty right now. So I'm just trying to figure out who and how I can fill all the slippers, because that's the one thing that we all, I'm sure all the nonprofits here, Hawaiian nonprofits, are thinking about that same thing, as legacy and succession, and how to create a pipeline or create succession, how to plan for that, and I think UH should have a big role in that, in supporting communities to supporting leadership in communities, yeah.
Definitely think UH continues to move in the right motion, continue to bring resources to communities. Again, I'm gonna look at my friend Kawika, who I get to try and follow in his footsteps as the previous director of Limuhuli. He's now back here on Oahu, and oftentimes brings UH resources such as grad students that are doing similar work, or that can help with our greater mission. And I think one of the things I always love about my conversations with my dear friend Kawika and that process is he's not trying to recreate something in Hāʻena, and he has great knowledge of Hāʻena as well, but how he can help and support what we're already creating and be a part of the greater mission. So things like that we're always open to, and definitely see the value of having new technology, new input, and things like that to move towards our greater mission. Those are things I think about when you ask that question, I suppose.
Just to build on what they said, I feel like if we as community leaders, what is that thing, that movie? If you build it, they will come. So if we create these spaces that need the OEV leaders, if we create those spaces, I believe that they will come, because you guys are pushing out some incredibly talented people. And they're looking for meaningful places to go and make their mark. So it's a reciprocal thing, right? We as community leaders can create those spaces. You can prepare that next generation to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And the resources that can come, like Kawika is a really good example. He's brought money and resources, academic resources, financial resources into our community. And when he was in the position Lei is now, one of the things that he helped us create is kind of a research protocol. And I think this is kind of important, so I'm going to dwell on it here just for a minute, which is don't just assume because you're well-intended and you got a bunch of money that you're going to come work in Hāʻena. Because what we want is for you to bring your ideas, and then we're going to approve it. Don't think you got an open door automatically just because you get a $10 million research grant and all of a sudden you can wave your money around. Because far too often, historically, research has been extractive and not regenerative. And we're more interested in how is your research going to benefit our āina, our lahui, our community. And I think there will often be a match, but there may not always be a match. So I want to encourage you as you think about building this next generation of people coming up to come with that perspective, right? Is how can my work, my personal academic advancement also benefit this community that I want to work with? I think that's a super important point. And I mean, Billy just came right now, the NSF is convening a whole week-long session about, how can science and communities and culture be more, I want to say, symbiotic, how can they help each other? But that's a big shift for NSF to be able to shift that perspective. And in terms of academics in general, it's a shift, right? It's not just about my research focus, it's about how can my research also help this place.
Nui, mahalo. Thank you for this portion, and I think I wanted to open it up a little bit for some Q&A from our audience. So I think we have this mic set up, and if I could ask, I think we have roughly 15, little under 15 minutes. Oh, sorry. Oh, less than that. Okay.
Aloha kako, Donna Davis. Mahalo for all of you for your sharing your ike with us today. I do have a question, but real quick before I go into that, I did want to mention for students here or people who don't know a lot about the Hawaiian history as far as land ownership, the Great Mahele Property Division, a great book for you to read is The Crown Lands of Hawaii, Who Owns the Crown Lands of Hawaii by Professor John Van Dyke. That'll give you a great background on that if you haven't read that before. So my question actually is how do we use these blue sky times with our organizations? How do we get them to be motivated to prepare for that next disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, it is when. And, we are dealing, a lot of us still with things from Lahaina, at least at my organization, and our day-to-day crises with the populations we work with. So actually getting people motivated for that next thing is I'm finding to be difficult. So how do we actually do that?
I always going to have something to say. So, I think that's such an important question. We've found in our community that if you want to get 100 people there to oppose building a bridge or doing something, that's pretty easy. You try and get 10 people to meet again and again over 10 years to do something proactive, that's way harder. Way, way harder. And I think, though, that what we found was effective is being satisfied that maybe you're not going to have the big numbers over this longer, extended period of planning and visioning, but that you've got to get the right people. So if you can, and I think those right people, you'll know them, because they're the ones that can actually visualize that future, as improbable as it may seem today, that can visualize, I like Bill's, I just think it's almost incomparable, the Hāʻena disaster and the Lahaina disaster because of loss of life in Lahaina. And I just, I don't know, I'm not from Lahaina, I haven't even been there since the burn, but I have to believe somewhere in my heart that there were community visionaries that were trying to envision a different Lahaina before the fire. And were they talking? Were they convening? Were they trying to create that, a plan for what it would take to change? And so I think part of it is having a vision that would excite those leaders. And then if you can just get a handful of them. I mean, literally, we started our Hui Makai Nano Makana with 5 people, That's where it started. And today, look at what it's come to. So that is a really, really important and good question, and it's the hardest work you can do, is to be proactive and get people to commit to meeting and envisioning when the odds are against you, and there's no immediate, like, we got to stop the bridge, we got to stop this construction because the EV are big, that's an immediate, everybody going to respond to the kahea. It's a little harder to get people to respond to the kahea when it's something off in the future, but it's the most important thing you can do. It's a good question.
I can just add a little bit from just our experience, but again, echoing what we experienced is nothing like what Lahaina did. After the aftermath of tragic events and catastrophic events, sometimes, years after the steam dies off and you forget about them. And for me right now, we have a little bit of that on some leftover Kima flood money that was still resonating in our community. And I'm not trying to, I'm very bad at being boastful, so it's very uncomfortable for me. But had we not tracked things like that, like watching things like funds and things like that have come to the community for aid, but years down the road, where does it sit? I'll give you an example, and this is, again, nothing like, I can't even imagine Lahaina, but we had some like $38.5 million left in our flood money, and at one time, it got absorbed to another project in our county and was totally not had anything to do with the flood. And so Chipper and I made a big fuss, and Nadine and some others, and we got some of it back. Now what we're doing is continuing to do stream cleaning. And sometimes, like, after a flood, this is now years later, it's like how to get people excited about arborist work and tree trimming and cleaning streams and all of that. And, people are always excited right after the event and ready to act and all of that. So part of my task right now is like keeping that momentum going. And for us in Limahuli, we're clearing over 1,000 acres of our main, not the whole 1,000 acres, but within that 1,000 acre, we have several main tributaries that run into our main stream, and keeping it clean and clear. And then things that support that, like we had major landslides in our area. I've been writing grants for things like drones, using drone technology for like hydroseeding, landside areas. And what I've noticed is it's hard, like at first, for people to be like, oh, but the flood is power ready. How come you're doing that? It's like getting ready for the next thing, and we know it's coming. And so just the other week, I got this huge drone. We're doing now hydroseeding in landside areas as a response for later on when flooding comes through our area. We can at least hopefully revegetate areas with native seed and things like that. But yeah, it is kind of complex after when the years pass to get people excited, and if there's trauma and things like that too, that's a whole nother thing you have to deal with. But
super quick, right? In times of disaster, the main thing, well, number one is ice. I don't know if you guys ever been in a hurricane. It's ice. It's like, that's the biggest, that's more important than gold and anything is ice. But second is food. And if you want to prepare, and just fill your coffers with food. And if that's anything that you can do now, is concentrate and make your Piʻo about food, and make your organization, center your hui, center your ohana around food. And that's like the best way to prepare for crisis.
Mahalo, mahalo. So we're just about Paul, but I'll take one more. Conti, you coming up? Maybe last question, and then we can have break for some more coffee. Yep.
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you guys. all three of you. You know, I've only been to Kauai twice in my life. The last time was a week before Iniki. We stayed in the gym, and a week later, the roof came off that gym. I want to thank Kupua. Yeah? So I was there on graduation day. Yeah? My mother is Anya Wahiri. Yeah. And just thank you for basically helping recolonize, helping retake back the University of Hawaii. The law school's always been good, but the university was started by the same people who started Puno. And Puno's who stole Hawaii. Yeah? And then...
Alum, so you can say that, right?
Say that. Oh, by the way, real quick joke for Kamana. How can you tell a Kamehameha graduate? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
That's right, over and over again.
Over again. And then biggest thanks to Kamana, because when I was trying to figure out what happened on Maui, I saw you at a press conference breaking down what was happening to Kaleo Manuel. And man, we needed that. Because that's us taking back the legacy of Kanaka Oiwi, Kanaka Maoli. You know, in the 19th century, this was the most literate place on earth. You know, we had all kinds of newspapers, you know, and just thank you for that, because it made me understand within 12 hours what actually happened, you know? And that's very, very important, because one of the things you gotta know about Puno people and the people that establish UH is they don't tell you what they did. Yeah, they never explain that stuff to you, you know? So thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay, this is starting off great. Punahou Kamehameha rivalry is up and running. That will never end. But mahalo Conti for the encouragement. You know, I just cannot. It's so much to put on an event like this, and to just reach out to incredible community leaders and to have you folks respond is one of the biggest privileges of my work, and such a reminder that I'm doing something that matters, because you folks show up, and to try to educate our students and community. So how about a big Paʻilima for our hui.